On the morning of May 3rd, 1975, a farmer stumbled across something that they would never forget. A body was floating face down in a river. Authorities came to the scene and recovered the body, only to find that it belonged to a woman who was bound and wrapped in cloth and towels. For nearly 5 decades, the identity of this woman and the circumstances of her death remained unknown. She came to be known as the Nation River Lady, and for years it seemed her case would never be solved. However, through the use of forensic genealogy, the case was cracked, providing long-awaited answers, long overdue. Welcome to the Strange and Undecided podcast. Welcome back to the Strange and Undecided podcast. I'm your producer and host, Jarrett, joined by my co-hosts,
Brandon
and Patrick.
Welcome back, guys. So we're finally back after our Halloween specials that we released back in October, which we had a lot of fun doing. And we're on to a new season. So more recently, though, Brandon was actually on another podcast, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sorry guys, I spread out my wings. No, it was a lot of fun. We got to go do a podcast about the Stranger Things show in the finale. It was a lot of fun.
And what podcast was that?
It was called Raised on Film. So if you're a film junkie, TV shows, movies, whatever, there's about 76 episodes out now. The host of it, Adam Galloway, amazing, knows what he's talking about. It was a really fun experience.
Brando is an avid movie junkie. If we're not talking about Strange and Undecided, it's anything movies, he's the guy.
So this is our first episode back, and we're going to focus on true crime for this case. There are a lot of cases last year that I wanted to cover that I didn't have a chance to because there was just so much. So this year I'm hoping to cover a lot of those, this being one of them. So with that being said, this is the cold case of the Nation River Lady. On May 3rd, 1975, a local farmer discovered the decomposed remains of a deceased woman floating in the Nation River, just south of the Highway 417 bridge near Castleman, Ontario, which is located about 55 kilometers southeast of Ottawa. The body, in an advanced state of decomposition, was found face down in the water. Ontario Provincial Police, or OPP, responded to the scene and quickly determined that the body in the water was a victim of murder. Blood was found on the bridge above the river, which suggested the woman may have been thrown into the river from the overpass. The most telling information occurred when they retrieved the body from the water. It was found that the victim's hands and feet were bound with men's neckties, 3 to be exact. Along with this, there was a flat, plastic-covered television cable wrapped around her neck tightly. It was too early to say the cause of death. However, preliminary theories were that it was due to strangulation. Additionally, a tea towel was wrapped around her face, and 2 pieces of green cloth and 2 towels were wrapped around her body. One towel had a depiction of an Irish toast, and the other towel had a depiction of flowers.
What's an Irish toast?
Like just people cheersing. Yeah.
Okay, not like a piece of bread.
No. Along with the body, a J-cloth, black coaxial cable, and curtain rod were found. This was very clearly a case of homicide, and fortunately, the face of the victim was largely intact, so an identification could be made. The only problem was, nobody was able to determine who she was. There were no missing person reports matching her description. It was also determined that the body might have been in the water for a week to a month, but in 2005, this was revisited, and they determined that it was almost a year of her being in the water. Because the woman couldn't be identified, police and the public referred to the victim simply as the Nation River lady.
Hold on. So if she was in there for a whole year, just underneath this bridge, how would nobody see it? It seems like a pretty exposed area. And how would she not float away also?
So part of me thinks that she was submerged for much longer and she only recently came up or was dislodged in some regard.
And also the fact that the blood remained on the bridge after a whole year.
Yep.
Interesting.
Well, and isn't it on a highway? So people are just racing by, right? They're not looking down in the water. Probably not a highly populated area. So people aren't just going for a walk along the river, right?
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, this is a pretty wide river. It's not like a small little creek. So in terms of the depth of it, I think it's significantly deep enough that if she was submerged entirely, it wouldn't look like a body was underwater. In cases like this, it is difficult for law enforcement to make any headway. If you can't determine who the victim is, you really can't proceed with an investigation until they are identified. Unfortunately, this is what happened here, and the case slipped away and became one of the most notorious cold cases in Canadian history.
Can I pause you for a moment?
Yep.
Were they able to match the ID of like the remains with the blood on the bridge?
It's 1975, so
they didn't have that.
Their ability to do that was definitely hampered. I couldn't find anything in the in the articles that I was going through suggesting that they tried that or anything. But again, 1975, like DNA is not a thing. I think the best they could probably do was blood typing, like blood type A, B.
Well, that leads me to believe then maybe her body floated there and she wasn't dropped off there. Maybe she floated downstream, and if maybe that's not her blood on the bridge, or maybe that's not blood at all, or maybe that's an animal or a roadkill or a deer that got hit or something.
Yeah,
possibly.
Definitely. That's the one thing about this case I found interesting. It is really difficult to find details. Everything now that's coming out is what we'll discuss later, but it's more so about her eventually this case being somewhat solved. However, I would like to point out that if she was in the water for an entire year, why would there be blood on the bridge still?
Yeah, it would have been washed away or...
That's what I would think.
Right.
When the body was discovered, the forensic analysis provided as detailed of a profile of the victim as could be asked for. She was a white female. Her age ranged from 25 to 50 years. Her height was between 5'2" and 5'8", and she weighed approximately 100 pounds. Her build was average and her hair was brown but was dyed recently, at the time of death, to a reddish blonde color. She had manicured nails, and both her toenails and fingernails were both painted the same color, which was a red or a pink. She had partial upper and lower dentures, and due to the stains on her teeth, could have been a smoker. There was evidence of an appendectomy due to the location of a scar on her body. There was no evidence that she had ever been pregnant or gave birth to children. She also had webbed feet. Finally, she was wearing a blue bodysuit with long sleeves and buttons. This forensic description is important in understanding the circumstances of the victim's death and excluding certain individuals. Police were able to rule out local missing persons where dental records or ID might have matched. At the end of the day, though, the identity of this woman would remain unknown.
Webbed feet, that's a pretty specific feature.
Yeah, same with her upper and lower dentures. I'll show you guys some pictures of what the dentures actually looked like, but you'd think with ones as specific as this, it would make a case like this easy, but it didn't.
Also leads me to believe she's older than 25 if she's already got dentures.
Well, yeah.
It's amazing that these articles of clothing haven't lost their color, it seems. Like they haven't gotten bleached by the water or the sun or the elements or anything.
Especially if she was in there for a year.
Well, that's the thing that kind of confuses me, which we'll touch more on later. But if you were in there for a year, I would fully expect a very different outcome compared to what police found. In 1975, local police and the OPP launched an investigation, as I mentioned before. However, they were quite limited in their forensic tools they could use, and the remains could not be traced to any missing persons file in the area or even in Canada. DNA testing wasn't a thing yet, so any evidence that would be considered useful today could not be tested. Several public appeals were made through the years to identify the victim or any witnesses, but all efforts led to a dead end. This is probably the biggest nightmare for investigators. For the next 4 decades, the case remained unsolved despite periodic media coverage and OPP reinvestigations. It became known in law enforcement and true crime circles as one of Canada's longest unidentified remains mysteries.
Yeah, just imagine being a detective in 1975. It's like you have like no resources. It's just like, yeah, we don't know who did it.
Yeah, they have nothing to go on and they're like, okay, I guess this one's never going to be solved.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Public interest surged sporadically, especially whenever updated reconstructions were released. As the years passed, police were never able to determine the following facts: who the woman was, what exactly happened to her, and whether or not she was a local resident, a visitor, or a traveler. So these are all important questions and can help to narrow down the search, and they're pretty general, wide-range questions if you ask me.
Just very vague.
Yeah, but you can't even answer those big, vague questions. So.
Yeah.
By 2010, the OPP decided to reopen the case as they believed they had a chance to finally solve it. In 2017, investigators had unveiled a 3-dimensional clay bust of the upper torso, including the head, found in the river in hopes that tips would come in about the victim's identity. I will include pictures of the clay bust and other sketches of her done by forensic artists. Apparently, this effort stirred up a report from a shop employee in a town close by to where the body was found, and they remembered selling a specific necktie to a man and a woman.
What? From 1975?
Right? I thought the same thing. I was like, how do you just all of a sudden one day go, oh, I remember I sold that specific necktie to this person and I have a perfect description of them.
Maybe it was a very rare necktie. It was their favorite necktie and they didn't want to give it up. And
It looked pretty basic.
However, despite that much time passing, their description of the woman they saw that day matched. However, a name could not be produced, and the man that accompanied her could only be described by his height and age, which was roughly 5'4" to 5'6" and around 35 years old. Not particularly useful information, and unfortunately, this was the only piece of information that really was obtained by this clay bust. It was now reaching nearly 5 decades of this case being unsolved. However, advancements in forensic techniques and technology might finally be able to provide a long-awaited breakthrough. By late 2019, advancements in genetic technology prompted investigators to exhume the remains and extract fresh DNA samples from the victim. The Ontario Centre of Forensic Sciences were able to generate a complete DNA profile, which was then submitted to international forensic labs and genetic genealogy databases. So genetic genealogy is, quote, a technique that combines genetic testing with traditional genealogical research to generate investigative leads in unsolved violent crimes and cases of unidentified human remains, end quote. In 2020, the OPP sought out a nonprofit organization called the DNA Doe Project, or DDP, specializing in genetic genealogy and using that to identify the unknown remains. By comparing the victim's DNA profile against public genetic databases like GED Match and Family Tree DNA, these genealogists were able to determine family trees and identify potential relatives of victims. But was this enough to determine the identity of the Nation River lady? All that work finally paid off. Within weeks of submitting the DNA profile, investigators connected the unidentified remains to a woman, although she was not from Canada, but from America.
Oh.
The remains were matched to her relatives, and the victim was finally identified. Her name was Jewel Parchman Langford, a 48-year-old woman from Jackson, Tennessee, who had been reported missing after traveling to Montreal in April of 1975.
it's a long ways from home.
Yeah.
The victim's niece, Denise Parchman Chung, felt that it was her responsibility to push for answers, as this was a looming question in the family for years. In an interview, she stated, quote, "I really thought the case was completely cold and no one was going to do anything, until I was contacted in 2020 about providing DNA," end quote. Interestingly enough, this was believed to be the first case in Canada where human remains were identified using forensic genealogy, which is wild that 2023, it took that long for something like this to happen. That blew my mind.
So did her family just not know that she took a trip to Canada?
They knew she went to Montreal and they reported it to the police and nothing ever happened. So that's something I do want to talk about, because if you report, hey, they went on this trip and they never returned, your first instinct would be to call the Montreal police and be like, hey, we have a missing person report of somebody matching this description. Do you have anything similar to that?
And Montreal could not have been far from this river, right? Like,
yeah, I think Montreal is between Montreal and Ottawa, closer to Ottawa, but it's not like incredibly far away.
It's not far-fetched though to think.
However, in 1975, communication wasn't as good as it is now. So I think that definitely had something to do with it. You have to call up, and if it's not something that's immediately on your radar, you're not thinking about it. What's happening like 2 hours like east of you or west of you, whatever.
I guess, yeah.
So that's the only thing I could think of. So Jewel Langford was more than just a cold case victim. She had been a prominent businesswoman, co-owner of a health spa with her ex-husband, and involved in her community in Jackson, Tennessee. Janice Malcock, a retired detective constable with the Ontario Provincial Police, stated that, quote, "She truly was a woman ahead of her time. In fact, she was so successful that she was the chair and president of the Jackson, Tennessee chapter of the American Businesswomen's Association, and in 1971 was voted Woman of the Year by her colleagues." Langford had traveled to Montreal in April of 1975 and never returned home. Her family reported her missing to authorities, but Canadian investigators were unable to connect her disappearance with the body found months later near Castleman. In March of 2022, her remains were repatriated to the United States following a memorial service, bringing closure to her surviving family after nearly half a century. Her identification brought long-awaited closure to her surviving family, some of whom had searched for answers for decades. But there were still some questions that needed answering. Who killed Jewel and why?
How do people get their information into a database? Is that consensual?
Yes. Unless you're arrested, as far as I know. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, if you have committed a crime in some aspect, they can collect your DNA and that goes into a database. Otherwise, it's all voluntary. So, for example, you do these like ancestry.com things, you have to do like a mouth swab. They put it into the database, and that's all something that you sign for and say, yes, I consent to having my DNA added to this global database.
And so that database can be used for anything, solving crimes or finding out who your grandpa was in Scotland.
Yep, exactly.
Did you say Jules, that she was 48 years old?
48.
So the saddest thing ever is that her parents would have been, like, they would have passed away in this time, right? So
a lot of her family members had passed away.
They would have never,
no closure.
It sucks.
Following the identification of the body, the OPP launched another investigation into potential murder suspects. In September of 2022, investigators laid a murder charge against Rodney Nichols, an 81-year-old American man residing in Hollywood, Florida, living in a retirement home. He was a well-known rugby player among fans of the sport in Montreal. Nichols was known to Langford and is alleged to have been among her acquaintances in Montreal during her last days. OPP Detective Inspector Daniel Nadeau commented that, quote, "While I cannot get into the specifics that will be entered at trial, I can tell you that the accused and the victim were known to each other," end quote. Court documents show that he initially denied any involvement in Langford's disappearance, but eventually provided several pieces of crucial information to the case and admitted to killing her.
What? Admitted to killing her? What? Just like that?
Geez, at his old age, he was losing it.
However, in newer articles that I found, Radio Canada has confirmed Langford and Nichols lived together at the time of her disappearance in 1975. A DNA sample was taken from Nichols at the time and compared to a blood sample on a green cloth that was wrapped around Jules' body. The result? It was a match.
Wow.
So what was going on in her private life?
That we do not know, and I don't think we'll ever know.
So she didn't come for a trip. She was like moving in with him, or did she go on this trip and then meet him? Or
potentially, this is also stuff that's still relatively new, and we'll get to this in a minute, but I think a lot of the information is still sealed in court documents because I don't think this case is finished.
Wow.
Did this lady have a family, like husband and kids back home?
Yeah, she had a ex-husband as far as I know, and then relatives in the family like sisters and
okay,
whatnot.
So it wasn't like an affair or nothing then?
No, but she did divorce her husband, so she owned that spa with her ex-husband.
Yeah.
So.
But no kids?
No, and that was evidenced by the original police investigation in 1975, where they did a full examination and determined that she had never had any kids.
Right.
So no direct descendants. Canadian authorities have sought his extradition to face charges in Ontario. A publication ban was initially imposed, explaining why the charge was not publicly announced until 2023. So this was all done behind the scenes in 2022. And then people had some ideas, and you know how that kind of stuff goes, where they keep it secret, but then somebody knows and then it gets leaked and
nothing stays a secret anymore.
However, now there are details emerging from court filings and related reporting that indicates that Nichols may have suffered from dementia and physical limitations, which have become part of ongoing legal debates regarding fitness for trial. In late 2023, Nichols was extradited to Canada to face those charges in Ontario. As of the latest reports, the case is proceeding through the legal system, and Nichols has been scheduled to face court in Ontario. In March of 2024, it appears that he is not fit to stand trial, and there have been no further developments.
What a way to go. Just dementia, and you can't be accountable.
Well, you killed a lady, so you deserve it.
Well, he's been charged and arrested. I just don't think they can really try him in court. It'll be all stuff that's settled outside of court. Like, he's not able to defend himself in any regard.
Well, especially if he has literally said, hey, I killed her. So why do they have to go to court?
Confession at face value then?
Well, that's what they're debating. They're trying to see if he's fit to stand trial, as in what he's saying is actually true. Because he could just be saying these things because of his dementia, for example. So, however, his blood was found on the blanket. So I think there's sufficient enough evidence to say that, yes, he did do it. As I touched on before, this case and the use of new technologies represents one of the first uses of forensic genealogy to identify human remains in Canada. Its success has set a precedent for how cold case investigations should be treated going forward and increases the chances of solving long-term unsolved cases. The Nation River Lady case is significant for several reasons. It remained unsolved for nearly half a century, which is an incredibly long amount of time for a cold case to be solved. It demonstrates the power of advancements in science and technology and how it can bring justice to cases just like this one. It also shows the importance of collaboration between various agencies across borders and how effective communication led to this case being solved. Without this cooperation, the case may still be unsolved. I can't help but think, but back in 1975, if some of this cooperation and communication were used, they may have even solved it back then. So this is something I want to kind of touch on quickly. There were so many different agencies working together in this case between both America and Canada just to get this identification handled in the way that it was, and it was very effective. That wasn't the case back in 1975.
Did her bust end up looking like her actual self in photos?
I'll show you and you could be the judge of that. This will also be posted in the show notes. But most importantly, it brought closure to the family that waited nearly 50 years to find out what happened to their family member. Some of her family had spent decades searching and appealing for answers, even engaging private investigators shortly after her disappearance. Sadly, not everyone in the family lived to see this day, but the rest of the family is relieved that they finally know what happened. From its tragic beginning in 1975 to its eventual resolution 50 years later, the Nation River Lady cold case is historic in the forensic investigative field. A case that began with an unidentified body in the Nation River has now become a textbook example of how persistence, scientific innovation, and international cooperation can solve cases that for years were deemed unsolvable. In the end, a loved one was stripped from their family too soon, but the culprit has been identified in her death. Let's hope going forward that more cases like this one can be solved in a similar way and give more families the closure they deserve. So, first thing I do want to touch on is the fact that they changed the amount of time that she has been in the water from initially a week to a month, then back in 2005, then to a full year, saying that she was in the water since 1974. And then finally, when they go through all the forensic genealogy stuff, find that she went missing in April of 1975. So there's no possible way she would be in the water for an entire year. So I don't know what they were doing in 2005 to suggest that, but I thought that was a little odd.
So it kind of makes sense with what we're noticing with the evidence, how the clothes are relatively intact and not faded or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So that makes more sense to me that she would be in the water for less time compared to what they had said in 2005. So, but yeah, I also thought it was really strange that if her family went to the police multiple times to say, hey, she went to Montreal and she's missing, what's going on, that the Montreal police wouldn't have maybe contacted some of the neighboring police branches to ask them, hey, like, do you have any of these cases? Do you have a case like this? Or there wasn't something that came up. But again, there were no computers. They couldn't just, pop up their computer and there's a missing person report for somewhere nearby with a picture of her and being like, oh, that looks like the lady we just pulled out of the river.
Was it very much like, hey, if it happened in our town, we'll deal with it. But if it happens somewhere else, they're on their own?
I mean, from what we've seen in like documentaries, and for the most part, that's kind of what it was. It was very, what's the word? Not closed-minded, but it was very like limited to just the town itself. And anything that happened outside the borders of that town, it was much less known.
Maybe it was something so simple and stupid as a language barrier. These Montreal guys are speaking French. These American guys don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, no, I thought this case was interesting in the fact that there wasn't much information. So to me, that kind of screams that not much was known and still not much is known, which is kind of concerning. You'd think after all these years, a case like this, which is deemed as one of Canada's most significant cold cases or one of the oldest ones, you'd think that there'd be more information and people digging, but there really wasn't. It's, hey, we found her body. This was the state that it was in. We have no idea what happened. 50 years passed and they're like, oh, it's this person. And now we're trying to charge the guy who killed her, but he's lived his entire life, which is insane to me. So he would have been like 31, which kind of matches, it's kind of close to what the
35,
yeah, that the shopkeeper had estimated his age at. So,
and it just shocked me that I know she was in the water for a little while, but with all the articles of clothing that she had on, all the cloths, towels, all that stuff, and they couldn't match anything.
Yeah, I think that also was
That's shocking.
Yeah, it was a big shocker for me when I was looking at this case. The fact that they had her face was well preserved because it was wrapped in the cloth, so they could make an identification. But you hear about cases beyond that where they take dental records of skeletons and they're able to more easily make a identification compared to this. But something else that I wanted to mention was that they did try dental records in the area and they couldn't find anything that matched it. But obviously, because she was from Tennessee, they're not going to find that.
But then wrapping her up like that, did he do it on purpose? Was it an accident?
Oh, he 100% did it on purpose. He said to the OPP officers that went to interview him that he regretted killing her. Which, again, you're 81, you've been caught. Yeah.
You've had 50 years to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. But
did he say why he killed her?
No, he didn't. That's not public information yet, as far as I know. Not sure why, but it begs the question, was that the only person he's killed, or are there more? Which is a very chilling thought. But
if you do that and you don't leave any evidence behind,
well, that's what I mean. It
maybe it wasn't his first time.
It emboldens people like that. Be like, I've killed somebody once, I can do it again.
You don't just kill somebody once, unless you get caught.
Being a big, probably a big star rugby player, meets lots of women, right?
Potentially.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if these court cases and the reason as to why he's ever going to be able to explain because of his current state.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I would hope that there is some explanation as to why it was that he did that.
Hey, let me ask you, Brando. You're like the sports guy. His history of being a rugby player and all the stuff we know now about CTE.
Ooh.
Does that lead to dementia? Do we know?
I don't know if it leads to dementia, but it I don't know. It's not saying that they go crazy, but it's like it just messes with everything and your judgment and everything and anger issues. And
I was going to say they become more aggressive and volatile.
maybe just one night he just took it too far and then the rest is history. But
based on the condition that she was found in, she was wrapped like pretty meticulously in all these. It wasn't just like a quick haphazard chuck her off the bridge kind of thing. Her face was wrapped, like she was bound. Her ankles and her arms were bound, which suggests to me that that was done beforehand. And then she was strangled. And then she was wrapped up after that with all the stuff he used to dispose of the evidence. So to me, that seemed more planned than a kind of a last minute mistake. I accidentally killed you kind of thing.
well, with it being strangulation too, right? Like there wasn't any like a bunch of cuts, bruises.
It's a good question though.
It wasn't a complete stranger, right? Like, it was someone who she trusted.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to go back to that towel, the Irish toast.
Yeah.
That's a very specific towel. Was this guy Irish?
Nope. Rodney Nichols. I don't know. Is that an Irish name?
Nichols sounds Irish, no?
After doing a little bit of research, the last name Nichols actually originates from England, so he very well could have been Irish. But unfortunately, we don't know that information as of now. For me personally, this was just a weird case because it kind of, yes, it took 50 years, but overall, this case, like talking about it with you guys, I felt like it didn't really take an overly long time to explain everything and understand it. Like, it should have been a case that was solved very quickly, and it wasn't based on the fact that this person was on vacation in a completely different country and communication was not that effective during that time.
The fact that there was no missing people at the time in Montreal reported leads me to believe that they should have expanded their horizons, possibly out of country or out of province.
Well, there were missing people, like missing person reports, but they didn't match the description of this lady. So that's why they were like, okay, we don't have anybody that matches this, so we're going to move on.
Yeah, but still, that's your clue to move on to bigger horizons.
Yeah. So I don't know what the police did between 1975 and like, since they tried again, but
until they found the random guy who sold neckties.
You know what's sad? The fact that there was nobody who came forward to the police probably is reason why they didn't push so hard working on this case.
Yeah, I would definitely say from a Canadian perspective on that side, nobody did come to them. So they probably were like, yeah, we have nothing to go off of. We have no reports that anyone's missing. So.
And the guy would have had teammates and stuff, but like he could have just been very secluded, just wouldn't have shared much about his personal life, especially if it was a newer relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the guys may not even have known about him or about her, sorry.
However, I do know that I wouldn't say felt guilt, but he knew, like it wasn't just like I accidentally did this and that's it. Like I said before, judging by the state of her body, but also the fact that he now resides in America, in Florida, Hollywood, Florida, and fled Montreal.
Far away from Montreal.
So he ran and decided to live his life in another country, basically, as far away as he possibly could get, because he knew that he was going to get caught if he stayed around.
He's just lucky it took 50 years.
Do we know anything about his character?
No, there's really not much information on him specifically.
Okay, then.
All right, so what'd you guys think of the case?
I wish the case would have happened within the last few years, and then this would have been solved. And that's I don't know. The saddest part I keep going back to is that her parents wouldn't have been alive, and like any of those close family members that would have been close in age, like none of them would have been around to see the resolution of this. And
right.
That's the part that pulls my heartstrings.
Yeah, this one leaves me unfulfilled in terms of We don't really have a motive. There's not really a resolution either.
Yeah.
And it was just a waste of a life.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is so much time has passed between this crime being committed and its resolution that, I don't know, I wouldn't say people don't care anymore, but it's kind of like it's been so long and the family has already been through so much pain. So at this point, like they are happy that they know what happened. And I think everyone else is pretty satisfied that this case can be laid to rest.
Let's say this whole thing goes to trial and court and all that, and he gets put in jail. I don't really feel like it's justice being served on her part. It's like he lived a full life and he's got dementia, so clearly he's gonna die soon anyway. Like what's a prison sentence gonna do for him?
Yeah, and I think that's what they're kind of determining with the fit to stand trial thing. They're like, is there any use in sending him to jail, or is this gonna just be like elder abuse at this point?
And
like abuse on a human life.
She had no kids, so is there anybody like pushing for this?
Yeah, her whole family, like she had sisters and nieces and nephews and all that stuff, and like other related family members that were putting their own money into private investigators and contacting the police all the time asking, where is she? Please do something about it.
Right. Well, if it gives them closure, that's all that matters.
Yeah, and that's the big thing in this case is that if they're satisfied with the outcome, then every piece of effort was worth it.
Well, and the part I will commend them on is that they kept reopening it a few times over the years and trying new things. And unfortunately, it wasn't until a few years ago that they actually found something that would work, and that led to the case being solved.
I did find it a little bit amusing. I was reading a couple articles and the police were saying, we knew this case was going to be solved all along. It's like, yeah, sure, you can say that after the case is solved, but like you had
Everybody
no
wants
idea.
to be the hero.
Yeah, exactly. We knew all along this was going to be solved one day. That's why we never gave up. And it's like, okay, that's nice to say, but...
What was their motive to keep opening the case? Just the fact that they had new evidence?
Yeah,
new technology. And
I think the case itself actually captivated the community itself. And they were like, who is this mystery person? Like,
so there might have been some pressure from the community?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people in the community are like, you need to do something about this. And it came kind of popular, but then it kind of slipped in and out of the community's eyes. And it went back and forth throughout the years. And they're like, oh, another 10 years has passed. Let's revisit this and talk about it again. Maybe we'll hash up some new leads. Maybe somebody wants to talk now.
How old does a case have to be before they close it completely without solving it?
I think 3 years it does range greatly for police departments. This was actually a question I was going to look up for trivia, but luckily I didn't do that. But I saw that on average, it's like if they have no new leads, no new information, and nothing has happened for 3 years, then it becomes a cold case. So it does range though, but that's the main
I thought it would have been
number that I
longer.
found.
Yeah, that's not very long.
Yeah. All right, speaking of trivia, are you guys ready to start?
The king is ready.
Ooh.
Those are fighting words. This guy schooled me last year.
So just to recap, last season or last year, Brando ended up being the champion of the trivia. So congratulations, Brandon.
Hold the applause. Thank you.
You know, I was very sad about that. I thought I was decent at trivia.
Well, you have a new chance because you guys are set back to 0-0. So
I want to say you beat me in the very first one, and then I went on a winning streak, I think. I'd have to go back and
I'm pretty sure that's
look,
how it went. Yeah.
Yeah. But now we're on even ground now, 0-0. Good luck to you, sir.
Good luck to you, sir.
All right, question number 1. Starting it off easy. True or false? Canada has an official database with an exact number of cold cases in the country.
I would like to say true.
In these days, I'd like to say true. Maybe not in 1975.
I'm saying in these days.
True.
True.
The answer is false. There are no official count or databases that exist. However, certain pages suggest that there are thousands to hundreds of thousands nationally.
Really? That's shocking.
I mean, that's what they got to do then.
Oh, this is our shout out to the OPP and everything. Let's go.
Yeah, the thousands, the range is thousands to hundreds of thousands. That is astonishing.
Wow. I gotta give my brother a call.
Where in the world was the first criminal case solved using DNA profiling? Was it A, the United States, B, Canada, C, England, or D, Australia?
No idea. I'm going to give it to the Canadians. This is the Canadian podcast.
Let's give America a shout out here.
The correct answer is England. The first criminal case solved using DNA profiling was Leicestershire, England, involving the 1983 and 1986 murders of 2 teenage girls. Which Canadian city was the focus of Project Prism, a task force investigating missing men? Was it A, Toronto, B, Vancouver, C, Edmonton, or D, Halifax?
I'll go first on this one. I'll say Toronto.
Let's go Edmonton.
The correct answer is Toronto.
Whoa.
And that is a win for Pat. All right, so that is the end of the podcast. If you have any ideas or want your story featured on the show, please email us at strangeandundecided@gmail.com. As always, thanks for listening.
And
good night.